Hi, I'd like to go over our culture agreement. This is a list of characteristics, expectations that kind of illustrate how we do what we do. It helps the applicant to see themselves in the role and to know what they're getting into. Unfortunately, in adolescent intervention, there are programs that are expensive babysitting. You know, give us a bunch of money and we won't let your kids kill themselves or do drugs while they're with us. And that's actually a great value to a desperate parent. But what we're after is something far deeper that requires a lot more from us. And this kind of helps to set that tone and share the vision of the gravity of what we're undertaking. So the first principle that we're committed to is integrity. We're committed to having the integrity to do the job that we've agreed to do, even when no one is watching, because in a sense, no one is watching. You always have at least one other guide with you, but the field director is typically in the office and the parents are at home. So it falls on us to hold ourselves accountable, to hold ourselves to a high standard. And one of many examples where integrity can come into play, inevitably, kids try to work these covert deals like, hey, let's not do that thing we're supposed to do today, but don't worry, we won't tell anyone so you won't get in trouble. And the temptation is certainly there to say like, it's not a big deal, or like, I didn't want to do that anyway, or I definitely don't want to fight. I don't want an argument. I don't want, the hardship of saying no. But this is our opportunity to model character. And they learn so much more from who they see us being than what they hear us saying. And so my approach is typically something like, hey, thanks for telling me where you're at. Here's my position. I've promised your parents that I'll do this. I've promised Wingate that I'll do it. I get paid to do it. I believe it's in your best interest and I care about you. So if I were to do what you were asking, I would kind of feel like I was lying and stealing even, and I would feel like I was doing you wrong. And so while I want us to get along and have a good time, what matters most to me at the end of the day is not whether I got caught, but if my character and my integrity are still intact, and if I did right by you. And what's great is when you reason with people, they typically become reasonable. But even if not, I guarantee when that kid is laying in their sleeping bag that night, the wheels are turning and they're thinking about it, and we've just given them a new option. Similar concept, we're committed to having a degree of professionalism and maturity, even in a somewhat immature and unprofessional environment. There is the temptation when you're surrounded by adolescents to become one. We call this cheap rapport, and rapport is really significant to what we do, but not for its own sake. We want to relate to them on any level that does them good, but we want to be different from them in the right ways for the right reasons. This doesn't mean we're on an ego trip or power trip. It doesn't mean we're better than them. They're troubled youth, we're troubled adults. But if I'm going to be a guide, I need to be ahead on the path. If I'm going to help someone ascend, I have to be on higher ground. They already know how to be crass adolescents. If I meet them there, I've missed the opportunity to invite them to something higher, to blaze a new trail, and to give them a new option. I like to imagine that there's a live stream from our campfire to their parents' living room, and that helps me to check the way that I'm engaging with the kids. And then next, we cultivate a culture of feedback because each of us has a blind spot. There are things that I cannot see clearly about myself without help. And some of them are beautiful things, and some of them are less beautiful things. And to kind of illustrate how this can work, when I was first guiding in like 2006 or 2007, I was working with a friend of mine called Laura. And one night around the fire, after the girls had gone to bed, Laura lovingly gave me some very hard feedback. And when I heard the words that came out of her mouth, the temperature of my face changed. I was embarrassed, I was defensive, I was hurt. But Laura loved me, and she wasn't a malicious person, and so I had to try it on, and it turned out that it fit. And I laid in my sleeping bag that night and wept for what felt like 2 hours. So this was a very, very uncomfortable, very painful experience, but it was such a fruitful and such a necessary experience as well. Laura knew that not only did I need a greater awareness of this handicap that I was blind to, but that those kids needed me to have better self-awareness so I could show up better for them. And I've shown up better for the hundreds of kids that I've worked with since, because she had the courage and the love to be a true friend in that way. And it mattered that she loved me. Because if we have resentment towards someone, we see them through distortion, and our feedback can actually do more harm than good. But if I love someone and my love for them dictates that I say something hard, I have found that it's the love and not the hurt feelings that sticks ultimately. And we need to be willing to sit in the discomfort of the temporary withdrawal of their affection. They typically love us, and we love it when they love us, but when a kid doesn't love me, I remind myself that my job is that I love them, not that they love me. And what's beautiful is typically my love wins theirs. So, and then on the flip side, we need to have the humility to seek and receive feedback. If I'm spending 24/7, 2 weeks with people, they are now experts at what I'm doing well and what I need to work on. And I want to tap into that resource. I want to ask them to hold up a mirror for me. And so, particularly when I give feedback to another guide or to one of our students, and especially with the students, this builds the relationship when I ask them for feedback because it shows I value their opinion. It also invites them to tap into their own wisdom. And also they can share really powerful insights, which I've experienced many times. But most importantly, I'm modeling for them what it looks like to seek growth over ego, and I'm giving them that option. And that's a powerful lesson even for adults. And then it follows that we need to be committed to remaining unoffended, and not only in terms of receiving feedback, but also because we're dealing with a demographic of hurt people, and sometimes hurt people hurt people. Our approach is non-combative. So like I said, typically they love us. But inevitably, because of the demographic that we're working with, we will experience some disrespect and mistreatment in this role at some point. And this is obviously a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. The challenge is to get above my ego, to not let my energy be driven by theirs, to not lose my confidence, but most importantly, the challenge is to respond not to the distraction of the behavior on the surface, but to recognize and respond to the wound or the fear or the confusion that that behavior represents. And this is not easy because we do have ego and it's a practice. But there is something very disarming about extending grace to someone when they don't deserve it. And I know this because I've been on the receiving end of it a few times in my own life. And I can tell you the impact of that. And this doesn't mean that we don't hold people accountable. I think often we think that it's either empathy and compassion or holding people accountable and boundaries, and that the two are mutually exclusive. But in fact, that's called balance. We can extend compassion to someone and see them as a whole person at the same time as telling them the truth, even about a hard thing. I like to call it being thick-skinned and soft-hearted simultaneously. So I always pull that kid aside and say, hey, I just want to remind you that I'm as real as you are, and this does affect me. And I want to point out that I've never been condescending, belittling, threatening. I've never sworn at you, whatever the thing is. And I want to invite you to that higher ground, but I know that it's your choice. And if you continue to mistreat me, I need you to know that I'm still going to sing you lullabies with all my heart. I'm still going to be completely invested in your success. I'm determined to love you, and I'm determined to see you regardless. And no one can stand up against relentless love inevitably. And I have found that if I can consistently love someone, especially when they're trying to get me not to, I will ultimately win their heart. And then I can influence them for good, and that connection teaches. And a similar concept to remaining unoffended is equanimity. This is even-minded or level-headedness, especially in times of stress. Things typically go smooth when we follow protocol, but we are combining two somewhat unpredictable components, one being the natural world, the other being adolescence in crisis. And occasionally, despite our best efforts, that recipe will blow up. And we have found that there is no situation so bad that freaking out won't make it worse. So our challenge and our opportunity is to zoom out, keep perspective, creatively problem solve, think clearly, and stay calm. And when we do this, the opportunity and the benefit to the students is that we're modeling for them that they also have the option to regulate their nervous system. If I can stay calm in the face of chaos, I'm showing them what that looks like and how it's done. And I had a roommate who modeled that for me in my 20s. It didn't matter if she wrecked her car, couldn't pay her bills. She would just skip the freaking out portion completely, laugh it off, and take care of business. And I'm like, I didn't know that was an option. I think I like that better. But in addition to giving the example of disciplining and regulating our own nervous system, this is fascinating to me. Mammals co-regulate their nervous systems, particularly the young are taking cues from the elders. So if a kid comes up to me and they're freaking out and they sense in my tone, my energy, or my body language that I am also in a stress response, it's almost like confirming to them, correct, you are not safe. But if they come to me and they're losing their mind and I say, you know what, it does suck, what should we do? And they sense that I'm calm, it communicates to them, you're okay. And the safer we feel, the farther from our survival brain, the better decision making we're going to do. But also, the more we're going to be able to internalize, process, and learn from the experience that we're having. Next, I want to talk about commitment. And what I mean by this is that we know we're undertaking a challenge, both mentally, emotionally, and physically. We know this job is going to stretch us, and we're saying yes to that. We're asking these kids to do a hard thing, and they don't have an out. We're asking them to find their edge and see it not as a limit, but as a challenge, and to move those thresholds. And we have ample opportunity to model what that looks like, because it doesn't matter how much you love the job. At some point, you will hate the job. It is the funnest, most rewarding, most fulfilling job I've ever had by a margin, but it is also the hardest and the heaviest. And so when we want to quit and gracefully see it through, they are watching, and we're giving them that option, and we're showing them how it's done. And that is a powerful lesson. We don't pull field guides from the field for anything we wouldn't pull a kid for. So when I show up to shift, I'm basically committing to these kids that come rain or snow or heat or bugs or swollen ankles or diarrhea or anything else, I'm not going anywhere. And when I say you can do it, I'm doing it. And when I invite a kid to do something hard, it's a thing that I would do or am doing or have done. And when I am in the struggle with them shoulder to shoulder, not only is that good modeling, but it's powerful camaraderie and relationship building. And we're looking for people who are willing to come on shift saying come what may, and to brave the storms. And then it's very important that we live our philosophy, because we're the vehicle that delivers our philosophy. And our philosophy is about striving, growth, progress, healing. So this is something that we want to be modeling in our own lives. We want to have momentum and movement so that they have something to follow. Their trajectory will parallel our trajectory. If I am apathetic, those kids will be apathetic. But if I'm energetic, enthusiastic, and striving, that energy catches them in spite of themselves. They will know how to get the most from the experience by watching me. So I'm also identifying and letting go of bad habits, character flaws, resentments. I'm also healing from unprocessed trauma, mending broken bonds in my own circle, making and striving towards goals in my own life. And I'm conscientious about the decisions I'm making when they're not watching as well, because if I spend my off shift in a drunken stupor, or playing video games all night and sleeping all day, or hooking up with random strangers or whatever it is, and then go back in the field and try to teach these principles, they will smell that hypocrisy on me, and my message will be weak and impotent, and it will be uncomfortable. So we need to walk the walk. We need to be the kind of people that we're inviting them to be, and we need to be doing the things we're inviting them to do. And then likewise, in terms of living our philosophy is also about how we see, connect with, and relate to other humans. So we're committed to having unity and camaraderie amongst ourselves as a company. We're the foundation that they're building on, and our culture has a direct impact on their outcome. And I have seen that throughout my career. And so fortunately, we're a lovable bunch, best group of people you'll ever meet. But inevitably, in human relationships, in work relationships, there are bumps, there are conflicts. And we're committed to having a solution-focused approach that assumes goodwill, gives the benefit of the doubt, and is invested in the success of all parties. And especially, we avoid toxic gossip at all costs, because nothing kills culture faster. And unfortunately, in my wilderness therapy career, I have seen that tragedy play out a couple times. And gossip is subtle and insidious and easy to justify, and I'm still not completely above it. So this is where we hold each other accountable and we safeguard our community together. Next, selflessness. This is a job that obviously has a degree of sacrifice built into it. We could all make easier money. When I show up to shift, I'm kind of leaving myself at home and I'm focusing out. Now, it's taking intentional personal time every day that enables me to do that well, but basically the kids come first. That's above my ego, my low energy, my convenience, my bad day, my character flaws. And we want to be really familiar with what those lower aspects of our character are, be it selfishness, laziness, competition, anger, dishonesty, self-doubt, etc. So that when the voice of our favorite excuse starts whispering in our ear saying, "Oh, Tamara, you're so tired, you've done enough," or "Oh, that kid's a jerk, it won't work for him, he doesn't deserve it," or usually for me, it's, "Tamara, you don't know what to do, you'll just make a fool of yourself." And so we can say, "Oh, that's that character flaw that I've been working on." We can override and go on autopilot if we know what to look for. These kids are with us for such a short amount of time, just a minute in their lives. And for some of them, it is literally the difference between life and death. But for all of them, it's the difference between how alive they're going to be from this point on. And their parents have put such an investment in this, not only financially, but their hopes and their prayers. And they cannot afford for us to take a day off in our shift. When we want to unengage, we re-engage. When we want to uninvest, we reinvest. We make the most of this experience. We fill it with as much impact and influence as we possibly can while we have them in this fertile ground and in this place where they are so susceptible to transformation. And then finally, on that note, I want to say, I know what it feels like to leave a shift with moments unmet because I bought my own excuses. And I also know what it feels like to leave a shift knowing that I left it all in the field, and knowing that I pushed past burnout to where the magic happens, that I didn't buy my excuses, that I showed up even when it was hard, even when I thought I was tapped out and done. And there is a karmic satisfaction in that I've never been able to put words to. There's something so rejuvenating about that kind of exhaustion, to have really spent yourself, to have pushed past your thresholds, especially for such a good cause. Finally, because the job is challenging, burnout can be a thing for some people, and we have found that the best antidote to burnout is gratitude. And when I was field director, there was a guide called Annie, and it didn't matter what was going on in the weather, in her body, or with her kids. I would come and she'd give me the rundown, and then she'd say, "But don't worry about me, Tamara, I'm just happy to be here." And she meant it. She would tell anyone who would listen, "I can't believe I get to do this for a job. How did I even get here?" And I remember feeling that lucky, but that's a fire that if we don't stoke, it starts to go out. And then we see these, indicators like we're blaming, we're complaining. But if we can stay connected to the joy and the thrill and the adventure and really the honor that it is to be able to witness, let alone have our hands on this kind of transformation for our fellow human beings, like what a great way to spend our time on the planet. And if we can stay connected to that feeling of lucky and gratitude, it makes the work not only more effective, but also more enjoyable and more sustainable. So this is our culture agreement. And I want you to think about these principles and these characteristics and to recognize that none of us have mastered any of them, by the way. It's a perpetual learning curve. I am miles from where I started, from putting myself in this incredibly challenging environment where the stakes are high and where this is my ideal. Man, there's growth in that. But fortunately, screwing up is also very useful in this role because the kids need to see what to do, how to gracefully recover from a misstep. Can't tell you how many times I have apologized to an individual or a whole group of kids for falling short of these ideals and for missing the mark. And then I ask for a new beginning, and I ask for their help to hold me accountable, and I ask for their patience and their forgiveness. And this is really, really powerful modeling as well as growth for us and as well as relationship building. So if this feels like something that you could see yourself in, and it feels like an ideal that you could align yourself with and subscribe to and to commit to striving towards, then you may well be a candidate for what we do. It is hard, it is challenging, and the stakes are high, and it is important, but it is so fun. And you can't even imagine the growth and transformation that comes for us as well. If you ask any of our guides how they're different than when they started, that is a lengthy conversation. So if you're up for an adventure and a challenge, and if this is what you will align yourself and realign yourself to, then we can talk.